Ayan! Kamusta kayo dyan, mga kameta? Ni hao ma from Taipei, Taiwan. Yan. Marami tayong pag-usapan pero let's keep this short kasi as you can see dun sa itsura natin, medyo, alam na this, medyo lagari itsura. First of all, ang hirap nung flight going to Taiwan, yung straight flight namin, sobrang maaga. My goodness, what time was it? Like 7 a.m. flight? Like 6 a.m. flight, so I had to go to the airport 3 a.m. Anong oras na tayo matulog, di ba? So since kahapon, we're still struggling to get some rest. But anyway, as you can see, we kept it very active throughout the day. So starting with Vice President Lai's speech dito sa event na inimbita tayo bilang expert to talk about Belt and Road Initiative, etc. Nakita niyo, of course, yung panel discussion natin. So first, nakita natin, kinover natin yung speech ni Vice President Lai, who, by the way, is the front runner to become the next president of Taiwan. So someone pretty important, someone that is being talked about all around the world. As Wall Street Journal, he had an editorial recently kung saan he laid out his vision for a global Taiwan essentially in the coming years and how to avoid conflict in the area. And then of course yung kay Foreign Minister Joseph Wu, Professor Dr. Wu also, who had a very interesting, very passionate speech about how Taiwan is not gonna be intimidated by foreign powers, etc. And then, and dito siguro naging mas excited yung mga Pinoy natin, mga followers, yung speech ni Senator Riza Hontiveros, who's also one of the guests here, and the panel discussion, the fireside discussion that she had along with our good friend Christian Esquera. No? So it was fantastic to catch up with a lot of these people. Again, Taiwan is a country that is actually not stranger to me. I was based here in 2019, just before pandemic, as a Taiwan fellow. Ito po yung time na sobrang tinitroll tayo ng big time ng alam nyo na who. Ito yung time na nagsulat tayo ng yung Tatay's Independent Foreign Policy. Tapos blank yung column na ko. So parang daming mga harassment nangyari sa atin. Even legal harassment to a certain degree. So I'm very thankful because Taiwan tayo nakapagpahinga ng konti. Of course, I had to fly in and out. Medyo hassle yan. But of course, Taiwan has a good spot in our heart. Because we had thankfully very good experience dito sa Taiwan in 2019 when I was here as a visiting scholar. So the Taiwanese democracy is very important at may relevance ito sa Pilipinas, no. Ganito, I mean, obviously I don't know, marami siguro galit sa akin because I'm quite outspoken about my points of view, not in Taiwan, obviously you can guess where I'm going. Marami tayong mga bashers or mga haters dahil, I'm not only outspoken, but I'm also right, diba? More importantly, I am published in places that matter. So obviously you're gonna ruffle a lot of feathers, and for me kasi, if I think someone important has to be said, we will say it, no? So, I mean, as you can expect, sometimes when we're in communications with folks from the opposition, among others, sometimes I'm wondering if sila sa atin, or galit sila sa atin, or they're comfortable with us. And, I mean, panahon pa lang ni Pinoy, I've already expressed a lot of reservations and criticism about the state of liberalism and liberal politics in the Philippines. So, my arguments are there. You can just Google it. No? Yung mga kritisismo natin dun sa lopsided foreign policy ni Aquino back in the day, yung lack of inclusive development back in the day. And that's why it was not easy. It was not hard for me to essentially predict the rise of someone like Duterte and eventually write a book about him. I mean, just barely first year of Duterte pa lang, meron tayong libro kung saan na-explain natin bakit binoto ng tao someone like Rodrigo Duterte. And that essentially explains my engagement with Philippine politics as an analyst, as an advisor, as an opinion maker, whatever you want to call it, over the past 6-7 years. Now, why is this relevant to the case of Taiwan? Because actually yung nag-organize ng event dito is, the host of this event is actually the Democratic Progressive Party, DPP, ng Taiwan, which is the ruling party in Taiwan of TAIWAN, and Vice President Lai, who's very much the favorite to win the presidency next year and potentially for the next 8 years or so. They come from the Democratic Progressive Party. Now, this is where I come in because, and this is where I think mahalaga yung intervention ni Senator Riza Hontiveros, because Senator Riza Hontiveros is also not your typical liberal or anything like that. She has a much more progressive leftist kind of inclinations and track record, which we can talk about. Now, let's go back to this because Taiwan transitioned to democracy almost, not one exactly, but a year or two after we transitioned to democracy. So in the case of the Philippines, it was 1986 to 1987 until we promulgated a new constitution. And in the case of Taiwan, I think it's 1988, if I'm not mistaken. So essentially, back-to-back yung transition to democracy ng Taiwan at Pilipinas. And yet, pag tinignan mo yung Taiwan, kumpara sa Pilipinas, the Taiwanese democracy, although besieged, also although there is a threat of invasion by China any moment, though the probability is quite low in the next year or two perhaps, pag tinignan mo yung Taiwan, since they have transitioned to democracy in the past just 30 plus years or so, they essentially established a very mature democracy. So, wala pang 40 years old, wala pang 40, napaka-mature yung democracy dito sa Taiwan, right? Yung level of participation of people in politics, yung crystallization of political parties, essentially two-party system between KMT, Kuomintang, and TPP, yung transmission mechanisms and the vibrance of the media and making sure that the voice of the people is heard, to making sure na hindi lang mga ilang-ilang pamilya lang or ilang-ilang dynasty lang nagkakontrol ng political or the political system. Lahat ng mga elements na yun nandito sa Taiwan. In fact, not only a mature democracy, it's arguably one of the most advanced. Both economically, Taiwan is one of the most advanced countries on earth. Its per capita income is rivaling South Korea and edging and closer to overtaking Japan. It's home to production of more than 90% of the most high-end semiconductors. It's a country at the cutting edge economically, but importantly in political terms also, Taiwan is at the cutting edge, in terms of minority rights, in terms of inclusiveness, in terms of making sure that the indigenous people's rights is protected. So it's very fascinating because Taiwan achieved this only in the past 30 years or so. And I would confidently argue that Taiwan's democratic deepening is ahead of United States and much of the West, right? More or less, you could say at the same level sila ng, let's say, Sweden or Norway and those kinds of very advanced egalitarian democracy. So na-achieve ng Taiwan itong ganyan klaseng demokrasya in a very short span of time. Now, kumpara mo ito dito sa Pilipinas. I mean, there's so many ways that the Philippine democracy has been described: contested democracy, cacique democracy, pre-modern democracy. Ako, my reading of the Philippines is, at best, it's a feudalistic democracy because the level of concentration of power among few families, whether anti-Dilaw, whether Dilaw, whatever you want to call them, all of those nonsense labels, it's just crazy. Like more than 70% na ating Kongreso ay hawak ng political dynasties, right? Look at people who are, well, our current president, our previous president, the previous president, and the previous president. Lahat sila, they come from political families. Now, compared dito sa Taiwan, sino ba si Lai, who's most likely the next president? Sino ba si Tsai Ing-wen? They don't come from prominent families or anything like that necessarily. They won the presidency, or they're about to win the presidency based on the merit of their own personal accomplishment, based on the merit of their own arguments and their mobilization. They work their way through public service before winning political office or retaining political office or gaining public confidence. Of course, Taiwan is a very vibrant democracy, so yung mga supporters ng Kuomintang, they will look very, very negatively, of course, at the DPP. But my point is just how incredible that the country that only has, 3 decades barely, like 1996 was, I think, the first time they had their directly elected, democratically elected president, like not even 30 years, kanila experience of full-fledged democracy. And look at how far they have come. And then kumpara mo sa Pilipinas. And this brings me to what Risa Ontiveros was saying a while ago, Senator Ontiveros was saying a while ago, and you could see naman yung speech, in-upload natin at saka yung intervention. What I liked is that Senator Ontiveros was very clear that you cannot have a real democracy. You cannot have a real democracy unless you also make sure na yung economic rights ng tao ay nire-respeto. Na, kasi hindi mo naman pwede kainin. No? You cannot feed yourself with just quote-unquote vote unless, unfortunately, you sell your vote, which is more or less the case. If you don't, so democracy cannot be just voting every few years. Democracy should be a system that delivers the public services, that gives you proper healthcare, that gives you proper public services, maayos na kalsada, maayos na eskwela, maayos na healthcare system. And the problem in the Philippines is, for the vast majority of our people, democracy has not delivered. And democracy is just this ritual of every few years voting for more or less the same group of trapos in alteration. Variation in themes. Some a little bit more trapo, some less trapo, or some fat dynasty, obese dynasty versus thin dynasty. Ito yung terminology na ginagamit ni Professor Mendoza among others dun sa kanyang studies. No, so, dito talaga nakita natin, yung problema talaga sa atin is feudal, yung ating demokrasya. Our democracy was never a modern democracy. It was essentially a feudalistic imposed on a pretentiously modern American-style democracy. You have this immense proliferation of not only dynasties but concentration of power among few. And then minsan, meron ka pang, I mean, like here in Taiwan, for instance, there are a lot of SMEs, small and medium enterprises, sila yung drivers of the economy. And then they have these gigantic, globally competitive companies like TSMC, for instance, which makes semiconductors. Punta ka sa Pilipinas, who controls the economy? Few big families practically control everything, right? And SMEs, although they're like 97% of the businesses, their contribution is very marginal. And in the Philippines, we keep on praising oligarchs, this family, that family. So it's kind of like our politics. Few families running the show. And obviously, if they were so good, bakit ang majority ng mga Pilipino ay nasa kahirapan kumpara mo dun dito sa situation in Taiwan? Now, obviously, there are structural factors because in the case of Taiwan, they also had a dictatorship like the Philippines, except their dictator was not just a bunch of corrupt, incompetent people. Their dictatorship back in the day, at least went with land reform, of course under pressure by US, and created some basic light manufacturing industries. So by the time the democracy came in, some of the basic assignments was done. In the case of the Philippines, that did not happen. We had 21 years of a certain president, more than half of which was dictatorship. But was that used to create world-class industries? Was that used to really push for land reform and agricultural self-sufficiency? I'm not talking about yung mga Italiano gold kind of discussion or Maharlika or whatever. I'm talking about reality, the basics. So there was that advantage. But putting aside that, I mean, if you look at it, this is the problem in the Philippines. What we always needed is something closer to the DPP of Taiwan, which is a party that combines progressive and liberal values together in a way that ensures when they're in office, they take care of not just political and civil liberties, political rights, but they also take care of the basic needs of their people. So one of the beautiful videos we saw, and we can see it in the number, this is not just in video, is gaano kaganda yung healthcare system dito. Gaano malawak, no, yung kanilang support system sa indigenous groups. Gaano kalawak yung kanilang support sa agricultural sector nila in terms of food self-sufficiency, in terms of road systems, basic infrastructure, financing for farmers. And not to mention all the kind of support systems that they have in terms of helping their local businesses to be export-oriented, world-class. And look at gaano ka accessible, gaano ka talino, at gaano ka humble, no? And public service-oriented yung kanilang mga leaders dito, no? So Taiwan, at once, is a very advanced liberal democracy, and at the same time, it also has this very strong Confucian emphasis on social harmony by proper distribution of resources, and also importantly, yung sense of public service, right? Because this is one of the most beautiful thing about Confucianism, yung real Confucianism, hindi yung state distortion, was that public service is it's a great virtue, and the best of the best and brightest should engage in public service and uphold harmony and welfare of their people. Ito yung Confucian values. So, in Taiwan, you see this perfect convergence of Confucian values and at the same time, modern democratic values. Now, kumpara mo sa Pilipinas, public service is treated like a family business or worse, right? And in terms of social harmony, I don't know what kind of harmony we're talking about when we have 7%, 6% growth per year, but based on some studies, 40 richest families take home 76% of newly created growth. This was a data in 2011-12 by the World Bank. I don't think that has dramatically changed. Because unlike Taiwan, we never build global industries. We never build the kind of advanced manufacturing sector. We never really fix the land reform issues. And this is the problem for our opposition, for liberals in the Philippines, that they have focused so much on political rights and civil liberties. But I'm not very sure about the concerted effort to ensure that we make the most out of globalization, we make the most out of our economic growth, to make sure this is as inclusive as possible and we take care of economic rights of people. And this is where I really appreciated your intervention by Senator Hontiveros, because she really pointed out what we have been saying forever, right? Which is, instead of blaming the voters, instead of all this disinformation talk, etc., all this what they call supply side analysis, you have to look at the demand side analysis. The reason why a lot of people have voted for anti-system, whether it's Digong in 2016, whether it's BBM and supposed return of Marcoses and all of that in 2022, is because people just didn't see responsiveness from the existing system. Now, I absolutely agree that it is important to appreciate na yung pagbabago ay hindi nangyari overnight. Now, nakita natin pa ako ni Digong na 6 months, ganito, ganyan. Now, of course, we're not here for con artists, right? But what I'm saying is, it's much easier for some of us, middle-class people, and I'm glad that Riza Hontiveros pointed out, is that a lot of us, maybe we have the patience and we have the cushion to wait 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years for long-term institutional reform, but marami sa ating kababayan do not have that luxury. And a lot of them are so desperate and that they have become so skeptical, if not cynical, because of decades and decades of failure. And these decades of failure cannot be blamed on one group or other. Excuse me, like yung mga, this nonsense argument na you had 30 years. Bakit si ERAP at si GMA, Liberal Party? I mean, let's not be ridiculous. Sino ang aliado nila ngayon? Okay. But that's it eh. You cannot push our country in the right direction if we don't have a comprehensive understanding what is democracy. If we do not do something about dito sa feudal na sistema ng ating essentially political economy. Both our economy and political system are dominated by few families. So in a way, we have been giving democracy a bad name in the Philippines, right? And this is something that we have to fix. So as much as we have to be talking about the devices of populism, neo-fascism, illiberalism, whatever, we have to also talk about how to make our democracy deliver for the majority of Filipinos. Hanggang ngayon, ilang milyon na sa ating mga kababayan have to go abroad or stay abroad in not the best conditions dahil there's nothing really back for them. There's not really much for them back home, even if they love to be in the Philippines. Marami tayong na-meet na mga kababayan natin, ng mga FWs all around the world. Shout out naman dyan sa mga kasama natin dyan sa Dubai, for instance. And lahat sila, they're super emotionally invested in the Philippines. Nanonood sila sa atin dahil gusto nila malaman ang nangyari sa kanilang bansa because may pake sila, diba? A lot of them, even if we're successful abroad, they still want to come back. They want to contribute. They want to bring back knowledge, etc. But whenever the conversation goes back to going back, they don't see much hope with the opposition, and definitely they're not also very sure about whoever is in power right now or back then to create the conditions that makes it worth to give up whatever opportunities they work so hard to attain doon sa abroad. So, makikita mo talaga, foundational talaga yung problema sa ating demokrasya eh. Because we never really went for a full-fledged, mature democracy. Unlike our neighbors, like Malaysia, like Taiwan or South Korea for that matter. And this arguments about Asian values, well, Asian and Taiwan and South Korea, and yet look at how democratically advanced they are. And what is even more, yung mas nakakalungkot pa dito is, Pati yung mga katabi natin bansa na hindi Northeast Asian, hindi industrialized country. Yung mga semi-industrialized lang, yung mga fellow quote-unquote Malay brothers natin, like Malaysia and Indonesia, sa totoo lang, mas malalim yung kanilang democracy in certain way. No? Hindi ganyang, I mean, in Indonesia, it's a problematic system for sure, but at least there's some level of political party game there, right? For instance, you cannot run as a president unless you come from a party that has this certain level of representation in the parliament. There is at least an effort of coalition building. So may nakausap tayo kanina na sinusupport nila kunyari yung more liberal candidate na ngayon suddenly it's Anis Baswaren, but we can talk about Indonesian elections later on. But I don't know, and look at the record of Jokowi over the past 9 to 10 years. Definitely not perfect, definitely not as progressive as many anticipated, definitely many disappointments, but he brought Indonesia in the right direction. Now, nire-respeto ang Indonesia, not only as a rising power, rising economic force, but also as one of the largest democracies on earth, third largest democracy on earth by some accounts, no? And in Malaysia, you have someone like Anwar Ibrahim, who, after all these decades of marginalization and all, you know, and despite the strength of more conservative, ultra-conservative forces, you pass, for instance, the PAS party, still you have a prime minister that at least ideologically appreciates the value of political and economic rights, as someone who himself was persecuted. So even some of the neighbors that back in the day were looking up to the Philippines, literally Anwar Ibrahim looked up to Ninoy Aquino, for instance, as an inspiration. Parang napag-iwanan din tayo. So this is the sad thing kasi sa Pilipinas, we always talk about, Vietnam. But we know, when it comes to Vietnam, hindi natin iniidolo yung kanilang political system. Ang mas iniidolo natin yung kanilang economic boom, di ba? I mean, good luck saying something negative sa government. Nila sa Vietnam, tingnan natin. Of course, we don't want a system like that, one-party rule, etc. But mas napag-iwanan, sa tingin ko, mas napag-iwanan pa tayo sa political development and democratization. From Indonesia to Malaysia, and definitely Taiwan, way ahead of us. South Korea, definitely way ahead of us. Now, I'm not saying any of these things to just, feel depressed or anything like that. No, I'm saying these things para magkaroon tayo ng perspektibo. Because there's a lot of nonsense out there about, ganito, palitan mo lang, sabi ni, alam nyo na, palitan mo lang yung constitution, automatically everything will be fine. Like, ito yung problema kung puro ma-ignoramos yung level of discussion natin. People have to understand, for success stories like Taiwan, for success stories like South Korea, for success stories, even relatively successful stories like Indonesia and Vietnam recently, many factors came together. It's not just this and that. Hindi ganun ka-simplistic yan. But one of the things we really have to appreciate is you cannot have a deepened democracy and you cannot have a vibrant economy if hindi mo inayos yung kalagayan ng karamihan ng mga kababayan mo. And that's where land reform is very, very important. That's where making sure few political dynasties do not control the political system is very important. That's very important. It's very important to make sure hindi lang few oligarchs are controlling all the commanding heights of the economy. Those things are very important. And also, just as important, is for the opposition in the Philippines to have self-awareness, to be open to constructive criticism, not to be defensive, not to hate anyone who points out the obvious, right, which everyone else knows, but to be self-aware and to also figure out saan sila nakakulang. So, kaya kudos kay Christian Esguerra dun sa kanyang fireside chat with Riza kanina. Right away, tinanong niya saan nakakulang din yung opposition, right? Na hindi lang tayo purong sinisisi lang hindi lang natin purong sinisisi lang yung mga voters, which is a dumb thing to do. I mean, of course, I understand the emotional frustration. I absolutely understand that. Obviously, yes, I understand that. But we have to try to transcend that, right? And we have to try to be a little bit less elitist. Okay, good for you na nakapag-aral ka sa isang elite na university. Okay, good for you na magaling ka mag-Ingles. Good for you na kapag-abroad ka at may nakita. Okay, good for you. Pero hindi yan ang naging kalagayan ng karamihan ng mga kababayan natin. So how do we shepherd our country in the right direction? We don't do that by being either self-righteous, sanctimonious, or worse, elitist, pa-intellectual, all of those nonsense. And denialists, and delusional, and all of those things, no? So, that's why, I was just thinking about it a while ago. Nasaan na ako, I mean, I really just started about West Philippine Sea, South China Sea, yung mga libro natin, karamihan dyan, mga international affairs, global affairs. Yes, marami tayong nasulat about democracy, populism, etc. But really, our primary job talaga natin ever since was focus on international affairs and all of that. But, I mean, I just realized someone has to talk about internal things based on his more, you know, I would say, connectivist understanding of the world and the best models around the world. Putting to use yung mga alam natin sa ungkol sa ibang bansa na pinag-aralan natin, di ba? And I also realized you need people who are willing to speak their mind, especially when their mind is driven by intense and passionate, and at the same time, lots of research and data gathering and all. So, yun lang. I mean, yeah, sometimes it gets lonely in a sense that you know you're not making many friends by doing the right thing, but it is what it is. I just realized that what I've been doing over the past year or so, especially in terms of calling out yung mga kakulangan, in terms of calling out what has to be done, definitely has not won me many friends. And I could sense there's some sort of iffiness with a lot of people. But at the same time, I also see that more and more people are appreciating saan tayo galing. Maybe they don't express it as openly. Maybe they don't want to halobila as much, but it's okay. We're doing what's right for the country. And we'll try our best. We'll try our best. And as you can see, I'm very passionate. Kaya kulang, konti lang tulog natin kanina. I said I'll be there, i-live stream natin yung speech ni ganito, speech ni ganyan. Para makita niyo yung matapang na leader, ano yung compassionate leader, kahit yung English nila, hindi katulad ng English natin. Yung iba. Although magaling yung English talaga ni foreign minister nila dito sa Amerika, nagturo at nag-aaral yan. And yun nga Taiwan transitioned to democracy really in the mid-1990s. And look at how far they have come. We already had some experience with democracy from Commonwealth to post-war. And then we transitioned back in 1996. Pero nasaan na po yung demokrasya natin? At kung hindi natin ayusin yan, malabo rin maayos natin yung economy natin. Yeah, 6-7% growth, best case scenario, but is it inclusive? Is it qualitative? It's better than 2%, 3% for sure. I'm still happy that we're growing 6-7%. That together with India, we're one of the fastest growing economies. But of course, together with India, also the Philippines had the worst contraction in 2020 dahil sa mga kapalpakan ng mga populist leaders. But we want to make sure this growth is quality growth in the same way that we want to make sure democracy is also quality democracy. Now, yung isa, and I'll try to close on this because magsimula na yung event and all of that. So, bawa na tayo, no? Ang isang challenge kasi parati dito is ang social media kasi is ito isang contest ng sensationalism, palakihan ng microphone, no? At ang problema parati is how can you inculcate and nurture critical thinking if at the same time yung system is biased towards sensationalism, shortcutism, and ignoramus kind of analysis, etc. But we're trying our best. We're trying best, you know. And our hope is one day magpa-percolate yung sinasabi natin dun sa mga iba influencer who have more energy and more direct, I don't know, touch with whatever, no? But in the meantime, of course, natututo tayo. I mean, I'm looking at all the comments, all suggestions, reactions. I appreciate that we're reaching out to different sides. But, yun nga, again, dapat bukas talaga tayo na, two possibilities, good possibilities for our country. And as I said, our economy and politics is not in the best place yet. But at the same time, there's some dynamism. At the same time, it's not a fully authoritarian system. There's some space. And yung mga nagsabi na masyadong mabait si ganito, ganyan, well, I'd rather have that than, tatay style na, no? But obviously, we have to do something about corruption. We have to do something about good governance. And hindi maayos yan hanggang political dynasties nagko-control ng lahat. Hindi talaga maayos yan eh. Because the politics will remain as a business. And over time, we have to have a strategy not only to make sure na big cities and big areas, vote-rich areas move in the right direction, pero yung mga peripheries ng ating bansa, kung saan hindi lang dynasties, complete warlords and gangsters are in charge. You can guess which are these areas. No? Hindi na natin kailangan pangalanan. No? So that's why it's very important. I mean, down the road, I'm hoping we reach out more to yung mga influencers or journalists and experts from yung mga probinsya. You know, people from Visayas and Mindanao and Cordilleras and areas that their voice is not being heard because dominated yung political discourse by kahit sino-sino and mostly for Imperial Manila. So there's a lot to be done. There's a lot to be done. So I'm here, and as always, I'm here and I'm learning and I'm appreciating and I'm just amazed by how far Taiwan has made it in spite of all. You know, of course, yung condition nila, situation nila dito. But I know also countries like South Korea and Taiwan are so successful because they're under pressure. They're under pressure. They know they cannot be weak. South Korea cannot be weak because there's North Korea, and Taiwan cannot be weak because there's giant China. They have to keep on going. So in a way, pressure works. Sense of urgency works. At yun yung parating kulang sa atin eh. Mahilig tayo mag political discourse pag election time lang, and then we go just back to our own realities. There's no sense of urgency. There's no sense of ambition and energy to sustain reform and growth over time. At doon talaga nakikita ko may pagkakulang talaga yung Philippine civil society. I think the Philippine civil society has many strengths, but in many ways it's also overrated in the sense that wala pa siyang yung sustained mobilization power beyond elections or beyond just one crisis or the other. Because yun yung nakikita ko dito sa Taiwan at yung mga ibang bansa na pinag-aaral natin who have been moving in the right direction. Okay, on that note, thank you very much again sa inyong lahat. Thank you for yung mga sumasabay sa atin, kahit yung mga time zone natin, kahit yung itsura natin, warag na ganyan, or even if siguro hindi kayo nag-agree pero you're willing to listen, I appreciate that. And again, I was very glad with the speech of Senator Rizon Tiveras, as much as I found always the interventions by Taiwanese leaders also extremely inspiring, considering what Taiwan is going through and what they have had to deal with. All right, on that note, maraming salamat and thank you very much and God bless, and please spread the message. Spread the message. Isang tao lang ako, and there's just so much I can do, right? But if we percolate the right message, if we spread the word, right, about anong kailangan, how we should do it, and wag tayo magpa-denialism, wag tayo magpa-elitism, wag pa tayo I hope that message percolates. And today, based on some of the speeches at least I saw, mukhang, we're not alone in thinking along those lines. And who knows, maybe, nakinig din yung iba sa atin. I don't know, but we don't want to take credit. Baka mabash na naman tayo. But you get what I'm saying, right? Yeah, because I can confidently say I'm practically among very few people, if not the only one, who's openly been calling out what I think is kulang sa opposition since last year. Who else has done that, right? The way we're doing it, okay? All right. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat. Have a blessed weekend. Tomorrow is Sunday, of course. We'll try to take some break from our usual stuff and try to get some rest. And habol din ako dito sa dinner event and my other writings. Yun. Ganyan talaga. Ganyan talaga. Okay naman. Alright. Mamasyal din tayo mamaya. Okay. Siye. Tayo natin humabol. Kamusta naman dyan? FIBA. Wala na. Talo ng US. Talo na rin yung Canada. Puro na lang mga Europeans, no? Good luck na lang sa... Saan ba tayo? Serbia or Germany? Germany is very inspiring. Interesting case, no? See, even sa basketball, mali yung tinitignan natin. Dapat hindi na US NBA. Dapat sa Europe na tayo tumitingin. Mali kasi mga role models natin parati. Mali minsan yung sport, mali pa yung role model. We should learn from the Europeans. We should learn from Taiwan, whatever. If we have the right role models, we'll move in the right direction. Hindi na problema natin, pati role models natin, problematic. Anyway, thank you so much, guys. Talk to you soon. Maraming salamat sa lahat ng mga support sa atin, lahat ng mga nag-comment sa atin, maraming mga nagmahal sa atin, mga nagbigay ng stars and support sa atin. I really, really appreciate it. And have a blessed weekend. Maraming salamat. Shukran. And siye.